gotta keep on that journey, step by step, iterating. That said, it is
Recording
10
in
past the
progress.
hour, so we are going to get started. For those of you who were here yesterday, let's see if I can find the correct slider to fade out the music. Yes, I can. All right, perfect. A little inside joke for those of you who were here at yesterday's presentation that I gave on mobile screen readers. If not, recordings are made available after the conference, so feel free to go ahead and check that out. That said, let's get started with the presentation today. Today we're going to be focusing on online shopping, designing an accessible experience, because accessibility is becoming more and more important across industries, but especially when you're thinking about shopping, when you're thinking about designing customers to buy. A lot of thought goes into kind of ease of use, but maybe a little bit less thought goes into accessibility and into understanding how ease of use and accessibility, etc., overlap and contribute to one another. So that's a little bit of what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking, telling you a little bit about Fable, about myself, and then we're going to be talking about, the way I'm framing it, is the 4 C's of an accessible online checkout experience. So the 4 keys, the 4 C's. Terrible pun, I know, but I like them. So there you go. Before we start, you should know I apologize in advance if there's a lot of throat clearing and coughing and snuffling, etc. I will try to mute while that is going on, but we are under a severe air quality advisory here in normally sunny Ottawa, Canada. Right now it's smoky Ottawa, Canada, surrounded by wildfires, and I work out of a basement office, so it is very smoky, and it is playing havoc with me and my breathing system. So I do apologize in advance for the snuffling and the throat clearing. That said, who am I and why am I talking about this? Well, I'm Sam Prue. For those of you who have not been to any of my previous presentations, I am the accessibility evangelist here at Fable, talking a little bit about who Fable is and what we do in just a sec. I am a full-time native kind of screen reader user. I was born completely blind and sort of got access to my first screen reader. Amusingly, that was actually called Screen Reader on the OS2 operating system when I was about 3 years old. So been online for my entire life and been using screen readers for my entire life, and really passionate about not just accessibility for folks who use screen readers, but accessibility for everyone who uses assistive technology, and the ways in which the accessibility for assistive technology, and when we think about accessibility and when we design for the edges, it makes things better for everyone. And that's also really what Fable thinks a lot about, and it's one of those kind of synergies, as we sometimes call it, where I'm working and have the privilege of working for a company and coming in to work at a company every day that reflects my own personal values and passion so incredibly closely. And so what is Fable? What do we do? Well, Fable helps you create true and lasting accessibility. It doesn't matter whether you're building something new or perhaps, as many of us have had to do, we just talked a little bit before the event started about the importance of iterating. We're often remediating something existing. And at Fable, we help you by making it easy for you to hear from people with disabilities on every part of your accessibility journey, because accessibility is a journey. It's not a one and done. It's not a project that you take up every 5 years. And Fable is there walking alongside you at every stage in that accessibility journey. We started with Fable Upskill, which is our custom video-based accessibility training that really centers the experiences and voices of assistive technology users. Fable Upskill makes it easy for everyone on your team to get the accessibility knowledge they need, no matter their role or current expertise, because accessibility really is a cross-functional, cross-team, cross-collaboration thing, isn't it? And for accessibility to succeed, we all need that training. And then it continues with Fable Engage. which is allowing you to apply those insights gained from the actual experiences of assistive technology users during every phase of your product development lifecycle. And at Fable, we think it's those quick turnaround times and flexible engagement types and helping you get measurable results that makes it easy to create meaningful accessibility improvement. If that's something that you feel like you're interested in and that you know you need at your organization, you can find out more about Fable and what we do at makeitfable.com. And you can also follow us on our LinkedIn and Twitter. As well, we have a digital bag offer for those of you who are attending this conference that you can click through. And if you are interested in getting some insight into where your accessibility is at currently, and sort of really hearing and seeing and experiencing what it's like for an assistive technology user to use your product or to go through one of your flows or to experience your website, absolutely do take advantage of that, because we can talk about accessibility until we're blue in the face, but it's seeing it, isn't it? And it's sharing it, and it's personalizing it, and it's having an artifact that you can share internally throughout your teams, throughout your management, that can really help people understand why this matters and why they should start bringing this on board. That said, let's dive right in and do some talking about accessibility. As I said in the introduction, we are going to be talking about the 4 C's of kind of the accessible shopping and checkout experience. And one thing that you're going to notice as we talk about these 4 C's is that these 4 C's, while they are crucial for assistive technology users to complete the purchase process, to be interested in being your customers, to do business with you, they are also really important for everyone, whether you identify as a person with a disability now or not. Because, of course, everyone will identify as a person with a disability at some point. Microsoft uses that model of situational disability, of temporary disability or permanent disability, which is something you've heard about if you've heard me talk previously. But all of these keys really are things that we're going to be talking about from an accessibility lens, but that are probably things you're thinking about from another lens. But the power of bringing the accessibility lens in is that when you design accessible experiences, when you design for the edges, you make things better, more fluid, more customizable for everyone. So let's talk about consistency. Let's talk about why consistency is so important from an accessibility perspective. When you think about people with disabilities, consistency is and has been one of the key factors that drives the success of major brands among people with disabilities. And consistency, even sometimes when it is consistency in failure. There are brands that I do business with and that I shop at every day that have major accessibility flaws, but the major accessibility flaws are the same from page to page. They're the same from checkout to checkout. They're the same from day to day. So once I learned the workaround, there are a couple of places that I shop where I can, and unfortunately very nearly have, purchased products in my sleep. Just because I have basically memorized everything that I need to do and all of the key presses that I need to make in order to make that purchase or in order to sign up for that thing, because it is consistent. And when you are someone who uses assistive technology, if you have to learn a workaround, you want to learn the workaround once. And you want to be able to use that learning again and again and again. So consistency is not only important, for kind of customers who don't use assistive technology, but when you do use it, it is magnified. Not only that, consistency is a critical factor in building the 3 other keys to an accessible checkout experience that we're going to be talking about today and during the rest of this presentation. And consistency helps reduce cognitive load for everyone. There are folks who experience cognitive challenges, whether those be challenges in understanding, challenges in attention, any of the other sort of cognitive challenges that people can experience through their daily lives. And when you build consistent experiences, you make it easier for those folks. And once again, it's this theme, you make it easier for everyone. Because once you've struggled to learn something, once you've struggled to find something, once you have made a user learn, figure things out, we all say we want to avoid, there's the famous design maxim, don't make me think, right? That's not always possible. But it's the old saying, reduce, reuse, recycle. We want to reduce the cognitive load and the thinking and the learning that people have to do. But when that is not possible, it is very effective and useful to think about reusing and recycling those learnings and those patterns again and again and again, so that you can start building return visits and brand loyalty. Because when you are consistent, if you're a person with a disability, there is often a lot of things going on in your life, a lot of things that you have to learn. There's a lot of things that you have to think about. There's a lot of kind of daily stressors. And for me, when I know that I can go to a brand or to a storefront and have a consistent experience at the same time, even if sometimes that consistent experience is only a 6 out of 10 or a 7 out of 10, I know it and I know what to expect. And I have had the experience in my own life, and I know other people with disabilities who have the same experience, where often we will pay more because the consistency is important to us, that it's not worth price comparison. It's not worth price shopping. It's not worth checking out the competition, because that would mean having to take on that extra cognitive load, having to take on that extra time, having to take on that extra learning. If we have the financial resources to do it, as many people with disabilities do, it's often a good deal easier just to say, well, you know what? I know what experience I'm going to have at website X, so I'm just going to stick with that, and I'm going to pay a little bit more, or maybe I'm not even going to look. And that brings us into that second C in the 4 C's of the accessible online shopping and checkout experience, that being convenience. Once again, convenience is something that we want for all of our customers, for all of our users, for all of our shoppers. And one of the ways that we get convenience in a very real way is by leveraging accessibility features. So let's think a little bit about that. One big thing is ensuring that browser autofill works. Every browser on the market today has a feature that can help you fill out passwords. It has a feature that can help you fill out email addresses. It has a feature that can help you fill out credit cards. How does that feature work? Well, it works if all of your form fields are correctly labeled. And so when you make a feature that works well with autocomplete and with autofill, not only have you made a system and an experience that is one click and that is seamless and that is easy for all of your customers, you have made something that is now possible in ways it might not have been before. For a few reasons behind that. First of all, if you are somebody who has physical challenges that make it difficult for you to type, for you to input data, you probably depend on that one-click autofill in order to actually complete your online shopping and checkout experience. Secondly, the autofill in the browser, in people's tools, uses basically the same APIs that screen readers use. So even if I, as a person who uses a screen reader, am not using autofill or don't have autofill configured for your website, if autofill can tell what data it should put where, my screen reader can also tell me what data I need to type where, because all of those labels have been added. The semantic layout has been done. And of course, folks with cognitive challenges, it can be difficult to remember, to find, to retype things like passwords, especially now that passwords are all supposed to be, 16 to 24 characters with 3 numbers and 2 symbols and 1 uppercase letter and lowercase letters and a space. Passwords are hard. We need to be making autocomplete work on passwords. You know what else is hard? credit card numbers. Credit card numbers are long. They are multiple pieces of information. If you have cognitive problems, it can be difficult for you to find them, to remember them, to type them. Half the time, I'm sure you've all had that experience where you think about buying something and you look at the form and you say, I don't have my credit card to hand. I'm not going to do this purchase right now. I'll come back and do it later. For folks with cognitive challenges, it might be, I'm not going to do this purchase right now. I'm just going to forget about the purchase entirely because the cognitive load needed to go and do that is too high. And it's also a security thing because when you are making sure that browser autofill does work, those autofill tools also have a lot of security implications. The browser will let you know if this is a safe place to put your credit card, right? We have the lock icons. We have all of these things that also help people feel safe as opposed to, well, I've got to get my banking information. I've got to type it into this weird, strange form. And of course, giving the option to save information. If you are someone who has physical challenges that make it take longer for you to enter information, if you're someone with cognitive challenges that make it a higher cognitive load for you to make a purchase, if you're a screen reader user who perhaps 90% of the interaction was fully accessible, but now there's something I can't do. There's one field I can't fill out. There's one button I couldn't press. I've done 99% of it myself. I might need some kind of sighted assistance to help me perform that last 1%. But you know what happens all too often? I don't have someone available right now to help me with the last, the final 1%, the last mile to complete my purchase. So I have to abandon it until someone is available. Then I go back. Guess what? I've got to start the whole purchase flow all over again because there was no option to save my information. Similarly, if you are someone with a physical or cognitive challenge that makes it a little bit slower, what happens all too often is the interaction is strictly timed. And you're trying to complete your purchase, and it said, oh, you took too long. Your session has expired. Click OK to return to the home page is far too often what I see. Click OK. Well, now you're taken back to the home page, and guess what? You have to restart the whole purchase flow all over again. And I get it. There is a reason to do timed interactions. Perhaps the thing you sell is a ticket. Perhaps it's something that someone else might buy and you can't, let someone hold on to the ticket forever. Well, the way you do timed interactions really aligns with giving the option to save information. You can pop up a dialog that says, are you still here? Are you still trying to fill this out? Are you still trying to make this purchase? If someone clicks yes, all of their information is saved and they can continue entering as opposed to having everything reset. And again, this same theme that you've noticed throughout my talk today, when you do these things, when you save information, when you make autofill work, when you make session timeouts more friendly, not only are you making things possible for people with disabilities, you're making things so much easier and more convenient and more fluid for every single one of your potential customers. And all of these things build into the next C of the online checkout experience, that being confidence. Because in retail, we are asking people to give us their money in return, hopefully, for a product or service. And we want them to believe that the product or service that they are buying is useful and suitable to their needs and will actually be provided, and that they are entering all of their purchase information into a safe website and that they are getting the thing that they expect to get. And that is a higher burden than, for example, a social media website. If I'm on a social media website and there is a particular interaction that I'm not sure what it's going to do, maybe there's a button that isn't labeled, maybe there's a link, I don't really know what's going to happen when I click this link, I'm just going to try it. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? I delete something that's a post I didn't mean to delete. I like something I didn't mean to like. Whatever, it doesn't matter. When it comes to retail, if this isn't accessible, maybe I was trying to buy one of them and I'm actually going to wind up with 100 of them, right? Confidence is so important. Nobody wants to experiment with their real money. And so what will happen if something is not accessible it will cause people with disabilities to give up much quicker than they would on a website that is not asking us to give our actual money. And of course, it's easier to go to an accessible competitor than it is to ask for help. I live independently. I don't always have someone around that I can ask for help, that I can ask to double check, to complete, to help me feel confident. And of course, if the purchasing process is inaccessible, will the purchased product be accessible? Sometimes that is the case. Of course, in large corporations, right? Those of you who are responsible for designing the purchase and sign up and checkout workflow might not be the same folks responsible for designing the actual product, the actual service. Which, fine. And I've had that experience all too often where I know from word of mouth that the product I'm purchasing is going to be accessible, but the accessibility of the checkout process just isn't there. But if I don't have that word of mouth to depend on from other people in the disability community, my assumption is going to be if my checkout experience, if my sign-up experience, if my purchase experience, if my shopping experience is a terrible or is inaccessible or is difficult or is making me feel a lack of confidence that I'm buying what I think I'm buying, well, if I need to make a warranty claim, I'm probably going to have the same barriers. If I need to contact support, I'm probably going to have the same barriers. If I'm purchasing a digital product like a piece of software or a subscription or access to a website, if the purchase process is inaccessible, I'm probably just going to give up under the assumption that the thing that I am purchasing will also not be accessible. And once again, that applies across the board, doesn't it? If our customers are having a poor experience when they are purchasing and their information isn't being saved and their autocomplete isn't working and the interface is arcane and difficult to understand, they're probably going to make the same assumption, fairly or unfairly, about the product or service that they're purchasing. And that all leads into the fourth C. How do we do this? How do we anticipate our user needs? Well, a lot of it is around customizability. Make sure that we're offering multiple. So, for example, if the autocomplete on somebody's browser perhaps isn't working, maybe they can purchase through the iOS app or through the iPhone app. As the world is moving on apace, we are getting more and more voice interaction-based tools. We are getting more purchases that can be done, through voice. And so make sure that you are where your customers are and making it possible to purchase in the way that they want to do business. Multiple payment providers is also critical. Not only because, some people have PayPal, some people have Apple Pay, some people want to put in their credit card, but multiple payment providers is also an accessibility feature because it builds on those other keys, doesn't it? If I'm a frequent PayPal user, if you offer PayPal, well, you've built confidence. But if I'm a PayPal user and you offer PayPal, well, you've also built consistency because I know how that interaction works. I know how my assistive technology will work with it. I know what the payment and checkout process is going to be like. And so the more options that you can offer, the more accessible you will be because you are giving users choice. And that is critical. Similarly, more ways to contact support. If you are deaf or hard of hearing, you would probably prefer to use the chat system. But the chat system that you built may or may not be accessible to screen reader users. Is there email support? Is there telephone support? Are there multiple ways to reach out when a user is having a problem? And once again, more customizable experiences are better for every single customer, whether or not they have a disability. The difference is those customizability options for your customers with a disability could make the difference between them being able to make a purchase and buy the product and them not being able to make a purchase and having to abandon their checkout experience entirely. And the conclusion to this, all of these keys you might notice, the 4 C's of the online checkout experience that I have brought up, They're not WCAG guidelines necessarily, are they? They're not something that you can run an automated checker tool over and just test and check some boxes and sort of, run your automated unit tests on and see if you've achieved them or not. The only way to know if you're truly achieving all of these four C's of the online shopping and checkout experience is to involve the voices of people with disabilities to help you benchmark and measure. How consistent are you? How confident do people really feel? How customizable is that experience? And so that's why at Fable and whenever I'm speaking, I talk so much about the importance of actually hearing from people with disabilities who do make up 15% of your market segment. And so is 15% of your UX and your research and your testing involving people with disabilities? It's something to think about. That said, I believe we've got 5 minutes left. So I am
learn from all of you. I'm also super, not even super active, a little bit active on Twitter, at least this week. So if you want to reach out there, then definitely down to chat there as well. All right, so let's get into it. So today I'm going to talk about where we are presently with AI and UX. I think I was really inspired by what I think Husani said earlier about this notion that X is going to change the world or X is going to change everything. And I think AI is definitely having that moment, specifically generative AI. And as UX practitioners, it's a really interesting space and moment for us because we're thinking about how will generative AI or AI writ to do that. All right. So today it is 2023, and it seems like AI is everywhere. AI is changing the world. It's in our devices, it's in our tablets and our phones. For those of you who were in the tech check earlier, it's in my light bulbs. Some of you might have smart homes, smart devices. It's used in sort of generals. Up top on the right, you have Gmail with its smart reply feature, and beneath you have Android Studio, which is a tool for developers that also has smart features to drive productivity. And these are but two of many tools out there that use AI or report to use AI to help people get their work done more efficiently. So regardless of how we think about AI and sort of our sensitivity to it, it really does feel like it is permeating many parts of our lives and really beginning to get us going in various ways. And obviously, we're starting to see AI in creative spaces. Over the last couple of years, over the last couple of months, really in the last year, we had this explosion of tools such as Dolly and Midjourney that have allowed people to create illustrations, edit photos, reimagine visual art basically with AI. So we're thinking AI is here and it's going to guide creativity. But as UX professionals, what does that mean when AI comes to UX design? So this is a good question. But as it happens, it's not really even new that AI is part of the design process. For some time, we've actually seen a rise in AI-powered functionality in design tools. Think about Figma and its auto layout functionality that's been around for, I think, a few years now. So auto layout can adjust your design and reconfigure it for different circumstances. It can move content around, it can move uh, components around, and people have been using that and extolling its virtues for some time. So even though it doesn't look like Midjourney and Dolly, it's definitely become a part of the design process. And then, of course, ChatGPT burst on the scene, and we have Bard pictured here. And that speaks to this rise in generative AI and generative content. I saw in Slack people have been talking about different circumstances where they've been using ChatGPT to do research or to write their content, to write their decks. Um, and I think that this is something that is definitely sort of in the zeitgeist right now. So these tools have absolutely revolutionized writing, allowing people to create anything from poetry to songs to their own content and all kinds of fun experimentations. So with the rise of this tooling, we've also started to, or sorry, with the rise of generative AI, we've also seen a rise in Figma plugins and other kinds of UX tools that generate content or visuals. So once again, AI has really begun to permeate the design process for many people and open the doors even to the design process for those who might not have traditionally been engaging in it. So this is exciting, but ultimately it's not without concern. The rise of AI, and specifically generative AI, has led to a lot of speculation about changes in the UX industry. We've heard a lot of that Gen AI is going to change everything, ChatGPT is going to change everything, and here are all the ways that your design process will become better, faster, harder, stronger, whatever Daft Punk says. Um, but it's also led to some speculation about the obviation of UX designers. So there's been tremendous excitement and enthusiasm, but also simultaneously a lot of trepidation. If you go on Twitter or LinkedIn or you look at blogs, you start to see posts and tweets like, will AI replace UX design? Is the UX design profession doomed? How will AI-based tools change how designers work? So that's kind of scary. But at the same time, there's also a fair amount of skepticism. Some people are arguing that these tools are good for spinning up ideas or for ideating, but ultimately, they don't always capture user, that is, UXer intent. They don't always work the way we expect. There you can find scores of examples of AI misrepresenting things or doing things wrong, or as I used to say, AI behaving badly. So this is very much a work in progress, and we'll talk more about that later and what that means. Over the last while, my team has been thinking about this and asking this question. What is the impact or potential for AI or assistive tooling in the design process? How do designers feel about it as well? So I think there's the discourse between what can it do and what is the perception or the perceived value, which I'll talk about in a moment, of AI in design. Um, how does it help designers? How do they feel that it helps them? And how does it inhibit? What might it do that you don't want it to do? In other words, is it cool? Is it creepy? Is it concerning? Or some combination of the above? Said another way, what is the value of AI in the design process? So our research has looked at designers and to an extent other UX professionals as well as developers and how they intend to or are using AI in design, where they think it could benefit them, what they're looking for it to do, the opportunities that they think it unlocks, and then ultimately what happens when they actually engage with these things. I have an asterisk next to AI because I think one of the challenging things about AI, and especially in the face of the rapidly evolving generative AI world, is that it can actually be really hard to tell what is AI and what isn't. And I think there are a ton of resources out there for and a lot of discourse around how do you design with AI, how do you design for AI. But if you're not an AI or machine learning professional, which like certainly I am not, even though I work in the AI space, um, it can be really hard to tell when a technology is truly AI powered and when it's different kind of computation. So my big caveat here is that anytime that we're talking about AI in this context, I mean things that are both truly genuinely AI powered, as well as things that are perceived to be AI but might not actually be, because your average user, even a technology expert, may not know the difference. Let's talk about enterprise, because that's why we're here. So ultimately, enterprise has a long history of automation, going back to the ancient civilizations or the Industrial Revolution or the rise of the first computers, depending on how you want to think about it. And as always, there's been a mix of enthusiasm and concern. To what extent does automation enable professionals, explorers, enthusiasts, and consumers to enter new domains? How does it help them automate parts of their jobs that they don't like or tasks they don't want to do? And to what extent does it interfere? So, this has been a focus for a long time in industrial organizational psychology, the manufacturing world, the hardware world. Professionals and researchers there have wrangled with this question, noting what people in their space embrace and where they stray away from automation, where they find it concerning or overbearing. So, for instance, automation might help someone do a task more efficiently. It might help them make fewer mistakes. It might allow them to do things that it's not really safe for humans to do or very difficult for humans to do. And it could even potentially save lives. But some worry that it misunderstands their intent, or worse, as we've already seen in the UX speculation, it threatens their job. Others, though, have a different perspective. Some people, particularly experts in a given field, have embraced automation because it's allowed them to quite literally expedite their process. It allows them to focus on things that are more interesting to them, potentially more creative, more challenging, or things that at this point you really can't hand over to a machine. So we'll talk more about this in a couple of minutes, but one example that I like to go to is film editing. So back in the day, if you wanted to edit a film, you had to do what this guy is doing. You literally had to cut and splice a physical strip of film, look at it with a magnifying glass, and decide what you wanted to do with it. And if you wanted to make movies, then you had to know how to do this. It was involved and expensive. Automation, though, has changed that. With the advent of software like iMovie, anybody who has access to it can create and edit a film. You don't need to know how to do this. You don't even need to know what these things are. So that's really opened the door to people who are new to the space or who are curious about the space. But for those who are experienced advanced filmmakers, these tools will also automate away a lot of the basic tasks. So for example, you can cut and splice with a computer in seconds as opposed to having to manually inspect a film strip and cut it up. Um, and that allows them to focus on more sophisticated, more creative editing techniques. So there's a dual benefit here. Novice users are able to try things out, but by taking away the difficult and mundane aspects of this work, it also allows experts or emergent experts to focus on the challenging and creative pieces. So that's an example where automation has, in many ways, opened the door to a lot of possibility and enhanced creativity. So, based on what we've seen about automation throughout history, and also what we're seeing in the field today, this has been my team's working hypothesis. AI is valuable in design when it extrapolates away mundane work. So let's talk about some of what we've learned here. So I'll talk about a couple of things that we've done. Obviously, this is, as I said, an emergent field. It's very much an interest of mine. Once again, we'll plug anyone reaching out to me or talking about this on Slack because I think it's something that's fascinating and I would love to hear where other people are with this. I will also give a shout out to friends in the academic world. This is the problem of AI in design or how AI can influence design and creative processes has actually been a big focus in a lot of academic labs. So as part of this work, we had the privilege of reading lots of papers and meeting lots of academic researchers who are looking at this problem and learning from them. So definitely have some recommendations for work and papers to share if you're curious. Um, we also wrote a paper or a case study that came out at Chi this year, and I've put the link at the bottom. I'll also share it in Slack if you want to learn more about some of our work and some of the work that we are building off of that others have done. So one of my favorite things, and we heard a lot about this yesterday as well, is to do participatory design. Um, we've done a lot of workshops with design and development professionals to understand their attitudes towards AI and AI in design. So, whenever you're designing or working, thinking about novel technologies, so technologies that people don't have experience with or that might be new to a population, it can be really key to bring those end users into the design and ideation processes. Because how you, as someone who is knowledgeable about that technology, perceive it, understand it, think about its value is ultimately going to be different than how someone who's new to it thinks about it. But I think this is doubly important when something is deeply personal. So in this case, all of us are UX professionals, but we probably have a variety of viewpoints about what we want to automate or not in our work and sort of how we see AI as a boon or potentially an interference to our processes. So I really liked to be able to bring in UX professionals and learn from them and sort of envision what they think the benefits and drawbacks are. And that those workshops might look like things. I mean, this was actually a workshop at Kai 2022 where we made very literal paper prototypes and pipe cleaner prototypes to illustrate what AI could do in creative tools. But you can also create storyboards. Do you can prototype small projects. You can draw pictures. But ultimately, you want to be able to communicate the intent and understand the perspective. So as I said, one of the issues, and Husani said this very nicely earlier with the X is going to change anything, but one of the issues of new technologies, and I think AI is experiencing this in a very dramatic way right now, or when you take a known technology and apply it to a novel concept or a novel device or something like that, is that it's very easy to conflate hype and utility. Right now, there are so many cool things you can do with AI. But ultimately, when you apply AI, are you solving the right problem? Is the problem that you're trying to solve even a problem at all? I think this is doubly important in enterprise contexts when you're looking at productivity tools to get things done. So it's not just about delighting the user or demonstrating something cool, but ultimately people a lot of the time are using your tools to do their work. And that's what matters at the end of the day. So this is where it's really critical to measure perceived value. What is the problem? And does your concept or your prototype truly address it? Would your users actually use it as you envision it? Why or why not? And again, this is for me, I think if I had to say one thing about researching AI and anything, but AI applied to any user experience, I'd say this is the most important part of the process. Are you really using AI in a way that is interesting, useful, and actionable to your end users? So in our case, we took concepts that were generated in some of the workshops we ran and turned them into speculative scenarios. So literally written scenarios that we investigated with different sets of UX professionals. So we use these as a vehicle to understand their attitudes towards AI and their design tools. But ultimately, we focused more on the potential solution space than the details of the solution itself. So really starting at the top of the funnel and then trying to winnow our way down. Some practitioners that we've met have done this with concept testing, which is totally fine using a rough prototype. So one other thing that I think certainly to me was very intimidating when I started working in AI is this notion that to really simulate AI, you need a full-on working machine learning model. You need to be able to demonstrate the predictability or personalization that comes with a lot of AI-driven experiences. And that certainly helps, but you don't actually need to build a working model to do this a lot of the time when you're doing perceived value work. Um, you can do it with Wizard of Oz testing, you can do it with storyboards. But what's important is that you're inviting your participants to imagine how they might use this experience, what issues it might resolve, and what concerns it might elevate. So one of the vehicles that we used to investigate this with our speculative scenarios was through a survey. So we surveyed many UX professionals about their attitudes towards AI in their work. This included truly AI-driven design experiences, as well as just general automation, so productivity tooling as in general, and then attitudes towards AI also in consumer concepts and beliefs about AI in general. So really trying to get a picture of how much are people embracing this concept? How eager are they to use it and apply it in different veins of their working and personal lives? So, drawing upon the workshop output, we use these speculative scenarios to create a framework for where AI might be useful in the design process and where it might not. Here's an example of a speculative scenario. So, again, this was something that came out of some of the workshops. Imagine that you had a design tool that could recreate your design for any layout or device. So when you use this tool, you can automatically convert a design for iOS into a design for a large screen display. So we gave them this scenario, we asked them to interpret it for us, and also about their likelihood to use this tool were it available to them, and then pros and cons and other concerns or benefits that they think things like this elevate. And we had a number of these. If you look at the Kai paper, you can see the other ones. We learned a lot of interesting things from this research, but I would say, generally speaking, this one of the highlights was that there are two main areas where participants saw or were actively using saw opportunities for or were actively using AI in their work. I think I forgot to say this earlier, but the survey we ran before about a year ago, so before ChatGPT and some of the generative visual design stuff emerged onto the scene. So there was this one bucket of efficiency that includes things like linters. So scanning your designs to make sure that they're accessible, that they meet certain accessibility standards, that they translate well, and other things that are really key to your work but are easy to get wrong and or do incorrectly. And then the other was the generative AI that we are seeing right now. So, for example, being able to generate images or even UIs from with a simple description. So very Dolly or Midjourney like. And people generally embraced both of these, but in very different use cases. You and no, let's take a look at that. So there were two major tension, or really a tension, I would say, between two different um, between these two different areas. So one of them was adherence, being able to help people follow best practices. Um, One participant said, an AI-driven design tool should help me by lowering the redundant work, so reducing a lot of those tedious tasks, and help me focus on the experience and strategy and thinking through these things that are more challenging and more exciting. Um, so that's sort of the linting and efficiency side of things. On the other hand, some participants said with innovation, they wanted to use opportunities to uncover new paradigms. So, for example, that auto layout or reimagining your design in a different context for a different device, speculative scenario that we talked about earlier, or showing a designer how they might be able to adjust their content for a truly novel device or a space that they haven't worked in before. One person likened this to pair programming, the idea that you have an AI driven design tool that sort of serves as your design partner or your design pair programmer. You're bouncing ideas off of it and it helps you think through problems, but ultimately you're in the driver's seat. So one of the things that was notable here is people generally looked at one of these scenarios or the other, or maybe things in the middle, but they weren't always looking for AI to do both. There are certain situations, maybe early on in the process, you want to think through a bunch of different things or ideate in a bunch of different ways. But at the end of the process, you're really just looking for that linter, a spell check kind of situation to make sure that you've hit the requirements and that you're not missing anything really big. So thinking about AI applied in specific ways rather than generally across the process. And ultimately, as I said, this research was done a year ago, so it will be interesting to return to it now that we have so many generative AI tools. But I suspect, given what I'm seeing online, that this sort of mental model will generally hold. There is also another kind of tension between efficiency and agency. So there is a desire to balance making things more efficient, One situation or scenario that multiple participants brought up throughout our research has been this notion like I need to create 10 different versions of something. I design for 6 different devices on 3 different platforms, and I need to rework my design for every single one of these. Could AI help me with that? Just regenerate a bunch of things for me so that I don't have to do that myself. But there is also a concern about maintaining control. What are you giving up to a tool or to AI? When is it not really yours anymore? And this anxiety around agency came in 2 flavors. One of them was just making sure that the AI was doing the right thing. A couple people gave examples of times when productivity tools that were powered by AI misunderstood their intent and ended up creating things that actually took more time to fix than time saved by handing it over to an AI. So an example could be if you're trying to generate a bunch of different different designs for different devices and the AI isn't familiar with the paradigms that you're hoping it will generate, then or generate act on, then you have to spend a lot of time fixing things, and that's ultimately more of a time sink. There's also an element of trust, making sure that what the AI was trained on was actually what you wanted it to be trained on, and that it was again doing the right things. And we'll talk about that more in a moment. So basically reasonable output that makes sense. The other was a desire to preserve craft. And I think this is really interesting because I think it's almost a personal thing. Like when you hand over something to a machine, we've seen this throughout the history of automation. What is really yours? How does it affect your identity as a professional, your relationship to your work? One participant likened UX design to glass blowing and said, well, you can mass produce glass products at scale, but innovation comes from unique contributions from the artists in their glassblowing studio, something that you're really experimenting on and iterating on yourself rather than handing over to a machine. Unique craft work that, in this case, the designer would be producing. So I think this is a really big tension, and I don't think generative AI has solved this. I think if anything, it's made it more complicated. So it's something that we'll want to continue to think about going forward. In other ways, there's a desire for a partnership between AI and UX. Keep the designers in the driver's seat. The designers should be able to sign off on any decision that the AI makes. And this is heavily predicated on trust. So the amount by which a UXer trusts the AI's recommendations will often depend on the task and the individual. I talked or I mentioned trustworthy data sources earlier, and this is obviously a difficult topic because AI is often treated as a black box. You don't really know what's happening under the hood. You don't really know what the model is doing. And again, if you're not a machine learning expert, you probably don't know what the model, even if you knew what the model is doing, you probably don't know how to interpret it. But ultimately, what is it trained on? What are the inputs into the decisions that the AI is making? What are the outputs? What types of material? And how can you make sure that the recommendations it's giving are really accurate and complete? So this is something that we're actively interested in, understanding trust and what drives it, and how it affects users' willingness to adopt or unwillingness to adopt. There was also a certain amount of concern around AI capabilities and the idea that a lot of AI tools aren't really advanced enough to do the work of a UX design professional. So again, that glass blowing analogy. One participant told us, a lot of these tools have a long way to go before they can perform the day-to-day tasks of being a UX designer. There are just too many variables at play that are difficult to quantify. And then they said, this is why I really want to be able to sign off on decisions and make sure that I'm preserving my agency as a UX professional. So, what does this mean in a world where generative AI is the talk of the town? As I mentioned before, we did this study in May 2022, which was right before the rise of generative AI. So ultimately, it's exciting and encouraging to see that so many people were calling for generative AI as part of the process. But as we know, not everyone's embracing it in the same way. They don't trust what it outputs, or they worry about its impact on their career or their relationship to their work. Novel technology can be amazing, but ultimately it's emergent. There are a lot of things that we're learning about. There are a lot of things that are cool and exciting, and there's a lot that doesn't work as expected. I think this is particularly challenging in enterprise scenarios. It can be tempting to hand off processes to automation, perhaps due to precedents, because we've seen this throughout history, or perhaps due to the scale. But it's important to tread carefully. If you automate too much or too soon, what are you losing? What do designers lose? What do your users lose? So I maintain that we should position generative AI as a partner to UX professionals and not a replacement for UX expertise. It's a tool to leverage, but not the entirety of the process. And as Husani said quite brilliantly earlier, there's this perception that X is going to change everything. But I think this is a case where X is going to transform, but not totally overhaul. Mind the hype. One thing that I hinted at earlier was also this relationship between when you think something is AI, but it's actually not. And I think this is particularly important in the with the rise of generative AI and the fact that generative AI has been positioned as something that could supplant the UX design process. It can be really hard to distinguish what is AI generated and what isn't. And we saw this in real time in a study that we did on the material theme builder, which you can check out if you're curious about. It's a tool that uses colors from an image to generate a color palette dynamically. And researcher on my team ran a study on this feature and found that participants thought it was powered by AI and started asking a lot of the questions that we've seen in when we've looked at truly AI generated experiences. How can I get access to the model? What data is it using? I want sign off over what it outputs. So the message here is to consider situations where AI might not be involved, but end users think it is, and apply the same frameworks. And again, perceived value is really key here. It doesn't really matter if something is AI powered or not, because your end users are going to treat it that way. If you want to see more resources around this, I recommend the Pair Guidebook. This is a resource from Google that pulls together best practices and advice and frameworks from AI researchers and professionals and data scientists and UXers around the world. And again, I'll share this link out after. So where does that leave us today? I think we see a lot of opportunities to bring AI into the design process. It can help UXers follow best practices, particularly in spaces that they might not be familiar with or where compliance is critical. Accessibility is obviously huge here. I think internationalization is an interesting opportunity as well, because when you're reconfiguring a design for a different layout, for a different alphabet, for a different writing direction, or even different word density. If you think about languages that represent words with single characters versus languages that tend to have very long words, that is going to have a big impact on things. Also, new devices and surfaces are coming out on a regular basis. And it becomes really important to think about how to design for new contexts that practitioners, even the most experienced, may not be familiar with. Not everyone can be or really should be expected to be an expert in everything. So how can we leverage AI to help share the knowledge and act as a teaching tool? I also was thinking about how does this change at scale or at large organizations, complex systems where you have a lot of domain knowledge. There might also be additional opportunities for AI to help. One one thing that came up a lot in our research, and I think is a really powerful opportunity, is bringing cross-functional team members into the design process. So this could be anything from another UX professional who doesn't normally design, like a researcher, to a software engineer or product manager, or someone who just wants to make sure that they're building really good, really beautiful, usable, useful, accessible UIs and following best practices that will keep users happy. So AI can definitely generate templates here that could help get that started. Um, Design systems are huge, and many large organizations rely on them to drive consistency across their products. And I think that design system adherence and adhesion is critical here. And we can think about how AI could help with linting there or making sure that that has uptick. And the other thing, I guess this is potentially a little controversial, but how might we use AI to fill in the gaps? At large organizations and small organizations for that matter, it can be really hard to make sure that you have total design coverage. What happens when you can't design everything with love and attention it deserves? What are opportunities to offload simple tasks or hand over pieces of the process to AI? This obviously is dependent on trust and who's involved and how much the organization trusts tools and models and whatnot. But I do think there's an opportunity there. So in Slack or on Twitter, I would love to hear from all of you about where you think AI powered design tools or experiences could help or inhibit enterprise user experience. I'm very curious about what might be different in enterprise versus consumer versus small organizations and large organizations, and what applies more generally. All right, so to recap, AI is here. It is part of our design process. It has perhaps silently been part of our design process for some time, but is making a very loud entrance now with generative AI and the speculation around it. It does many things that hopefully benefit, allows people to create and explore new things. It allows them to innovate. It serves as a powerful correction tool and align with standards. But ultimately, trust is paramount. And it's really important not to fall prey to the hype, but to ensure that AI is helping users, that they understand what they're getting out of it, rather than something that they see as a threat or something that can overhaul their process in unhelpful ways. And this, as I said earlier, is an emergent space. I think we're going to see a lot of interesting research insights coming out in this space over the years. And I welcome your thoughts and opinions. So thank you so much.
Clara, thank